Welcome to Lesson 2 in Unit 14, Change Over Time. In this lesson, students will work to answer the question, what can we learn about an animal's life cycle by making careful observations? In the previous lesson, students figured out that plants have a life cycle of birth, growth, reproduction, and death. In this lesson, students observe the various stages of a darkling beetle's life cycle and learn about other animals that lay eggs. Students figure out that animals have a similar pattern of life cycle as plants: birth, growth, reproduction, and death. This lesson will take approximately 2 days plus monitoring time. Before starting this lesson, you will prepare the mealworms for observation. Your container of mealworms should already be delivered to your building, but if they are not, contact Diane Pilla at dpilla@wustl.edu to receive them. Once you receive these live mealworms, you will follow the directions to immediately place the contents of the mealworm container in the plastic container provided. You will need to add a slice of fresh carrot or potato so the mealworms have a moisture source. The plastic container of mealworms should be stored in the refrigerator until 24 hours before this lesson begins, at which time you will want to put the container in the classroom to bring it up to room temperature. If the vegetable chunk gets moldy before you start this lesson, just replace it. If you have not used mealworms before, you may want to learn more about them ahead of time because students will have questions. Here is a resource that describes the parts of a mealworm: mealwormcare.org/anatomy. To begin, tell the class, in our last lesson we learned all about a plant's life cycle, and animals have a life cycle too. One type of animal is an insect. How do you think an insect's life cycle might be the same or different than a plant's? Allow students to turn and talk. Take a few student responses. Next, take out a few of the mealworms and hold them gently in your hand or in a petri dish, modeling to students how to handle them. Let students look at the mealworms and ask them if they think these are young or adult insects. Take a few student responses. Tell the class, in this lesson we are going to observe mealworms and learn about their life cycle. Pass out the mealworm observation sheet on student page 4. And give a group of students a mealworm or beetle in a petri dish. See the tutorial for examples. Allow the students to use hand lenses to view the structures of the mealworm. Have students write their observations on student page 4. Keep the mealworms in a place that is not cold if you want them to grow to their adult stage for your students to view. If you have kept them cold, they will stay in the mealworm phase only. If there are no pupae or beetles yet, you may want to show pictures of these stages to students. Use the mealworm book provided. Students may handle them very carefully, then they should wash their hands. Remind the students that these are living creatures and to be very gentle with them. Return the mealworms back to the plastic Tupperware afterwards. The larvae will become beetles if kept at room temperature within a week, so you could come back to observe them later while you continue teaching mySci lessons. In the explain portion of this lesson, the class will read the book Mealworms. Refer to the Read Aloud Guide on teacher page 4. Next, watch the video clip Mealworm to Darkling Beetle, which is a time-lapse of this insect's life cycle. Ask students to think, pair, share to discuss how this animal life cycle compares to the plant life cycle. Remind students that these 4 stages are life cycle patterns that are common to both plants and animals. Once the mealworm activity is over, you should dispose of the mealworms and beetles, either by freezing them, then throwing them away, or feeding them to a classroom pet that eats mealworms, such as a bearded dragon. Please do not release them into the wild. Follow the instructions in the lesson plan and sidebar for more information. In the elaborate, tell students, one stage of the darkling beetle that we did not see was the egg stage. Many types of animals reproduce by laying eggs. Can you name some animals you know that lay eggs? Allow students to turn and talk. Take student responses. Then read the Egg book provided and see Read Aloud Guide on Teacher page 5 for guidance. Ask students, what are some animals that lay eggs that you didn't know about before? Take student responses. Remind students that eggs are created as part of reproduction and allow for the birth of new living things. Finally, remind the class that frogs are a type of animal that lays eggs based on the book reading. Show the frog video and have students point out the life cycle stages of a frog. Have students draw the stages of tadpole, froglet, and frog seen in the video on the frog life cycle sheet on student page 5. You may want to allow them to give constructive feedback about their models to each other. Tie back to the unit phenomenon of the pink katydid story. Students may notice that insects have a life cycle of birth, growth, reproduction, and death, just like the other animal examples from this lesson. For further examples of how insect life cycles can differ, show students the following video. This will give students the knowledge that not all insect life cycles are exactly the same, as is the case with the katydids. By the end of this lesson, students observed the various stages of a darkling beetle's life cycle and learned about other animals that lay eggs. Students figured out that animals have a similar pattern of life cycle as plants. They go through birth, growth, reproduction, and death. This lesson prepares students for the next section where they will consider how to best create a model to compare life cycles of different organisms.